Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about all the books I read in August. I have decided that from now on I'm not going to be talking about books that I read in vlogs in my wrap-ups. I just don't think there's any point in repeating myself. I also don't want to put myself on a strict time constraint to finish vlogs in a certain amount of time because they do take me a while, and I just think trying to do some in a month is a little bit unrealistic for me with the amount of books I want to read per vlogs. If I end up loving the books that I do read in vlogs, I'm sure they will come up in future videos and I'll probably not stop talking about them, so it doesn't really matter anyway. Okay, quickly, I wanted to start off by talking about the 5th season. I actually haven't finished this. I am less than 100 pages away from finishing it though, so I'll just quickly share my thoughts. This was supposed to be a buddy read with Allison and Martina. Both of them I will have linked down below. They are lovely, please check them out. But they finished this before me. I've put this book off for such a crazy amount of time. I bought the entire trilogy. Yes, not just book one. I bought all 3 books in this series 3 years ago for my birthday, and I still haven't gotten around to it till now. I was very intimidated to pick this book up because I'd heard, I don't know where, but basically my expectations for this book was that it was going to be very dense with the writing style, possibly even quite dry. I was also expecting that the world building to be super complicated and difficult to understand and get into, and I didn't find that to be the case at all. I just immediately opened this, started reading, and ate this story up. The earth in this world is constantly having supernatural disasters, and it's constantly changing and killing people. There are people in this world who have these abilities that make them very, very closely tied to the earth itself. If some great or strong emotion is evoked out of them, then their reaction can also cause the earth to react. These people are feared, and that fear leads to a lot of them getting brutally murdered, and then there are others of them who are also taken in by this school where they are taught to learn to control their abilities, but at the same time it's really them being learned how to be under control by what's known as the Guardians. We follow 3 different perspectives in this. A mother who has just lost her son. Her son was beaten to death by her husband, his father, and she's now tracking down her husband in order to, I think she wants to get revenge, but I think her main goal is to retrieve her daughter who her husband took with her. The second perspective we're following is this young girl who her mother has just given her away to a guardian, so she's being taken off to the school in order to learn how to harness her abilities. And the last perspective we're following is this, I want to say she's like early 20s. She's someone who is known as a breeder in this world. It's just really terrifying, this book, and also really fascinating. I don't want to say much more than that. This has really surprised me. I think the way this story has been constructed is very genius. Like I said, I've got less than 100 pages to go, and everyone keeps telling me that the ending is a shocker. I'm very keen to see what that is because I'm about to get there. I'll get there right after this video. This is already a 5-star read for me. I just found this book to be so much more of an addictive read than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot harder to get through, so I'm just really happy I finally got to this. The next book I want to quickly talk about was a reread for me, and that is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I read this book a couple years ago, and I also read the second book in the series. However, I never got to the final book in the trilogy, which is why I decided to pick this book up again. This book follows Fitz, and Fitz is this young boy who is a bastard. He's a bastard to the prince, and in order to make use of him, the royal family have him from a very young age trained to become an assassin. We follow Fitz from about when he's 6 years old to his adolescent years in this. We see him training to become an assassin. We see him not maneuvering court politics, but coming to understand the court and the politics in it. We see him and his relationships. I think there are a lot of really well-crafted relationships in this book with Fitz and all the characters. There's not really many characters. Well, actually, I think there's only like 1 character that's his age that's around. Everyone else's that he has any like significant relationship with is a lot older, and I really thought they were really, really well done. He has a lot of mentors in his life for different reasons. We also see him come to understand his abilities. He sort of has 2 separate abilities. He has this ability known as the wit, which he inherited from his father. The wit is something that sort of makes the royal family the royal family. It's this like power of the mind, and it's something that the royal family use to keep peace in the kingdoms. It's very hard to explain. It makes sense when you read it, but like I don't think I can explain it to make a whole lot of sense, but it was very interesting to explore. And what was also interesting was he has this ability that he inherited from his mother. Now, his mother, you don't really ever really know who she is. That's part of his identity as a bastard, but his mother has this ability that I guess it's another sort of mind ability, but in a very lesser form compared to the wit. The wit is something that is seen as very powerful and to be admired. However, the ability that he's inherited from his mom, it's really looked down upon and not encouraged to use. It's essentially something to do with like connecting to animals and being able to communicate with animals. However, if you communicate with them too much, then you can kind of turn into an animal yourself in like your behavior. My favorite thing about this book is there's just so much depth. There's so much depth to Fitz's character. I mean, we have this assassin character who has so much heart. He loves animals. Like I was saying, he's not supposed to have a relationship with animals, but there are quite a few relationships he has with animals in this. He has really endearing relationships with other characters, and he just cares so profoundly and deeply, and he's so loyal as well. And then there's so much depth as well to the magic. Like, we got quite a bit of it in here, but I can tell that there's going to be so much more to explore in future books. And also, like, the court politics was so interesting. I think if you are someone who's really interested in court politics, read this book because they're so well done in this, and it's very intricate. I think some people might find this book quite slow and over detailed because it does go off on some tangents and does over detail certain aspects of the story that you might not necessarily be interested in. However, I still really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I then completed Ruin, which is the third book in the Faithful and the Fallen series, which is a series you would have heard about if you've been following my channel, because I have been making my way through it this year. It's like Game of Thrones but Vikings, and there's like a lot of giants. I can't say a whole lot about this book obviously since it is the third book. However, I will tell you it was my least favorite in the series so far. Unfortunately, that's because I felt like there was a lot of setup in this book for the final book, which is book 4. Also, my favorite characters, their POVs weren't very present in this book, and unfortunately my least favorite character had a lot of POVs in this book, so that was not fun. And yeah, it didn't hold my interest a whole lot. I still do really like this series, and I think it's very easy to read. It's not super heavy on the world building. Okay, I then read Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I picked this up because it was the August book club pick for the Black Hotties, so I really enjoyed this. I think I had a lot of fun reading this, especially since it was really nice to break up all these huge fantasy books that I read with this book. It's an adult contemporary book, and we are following this 25-year-old black girl who is a babysitter for this white family, and one day she's looking after this little girl in the supermarket, and someone thinks that she's kidnapped this little girl and calls over the security guard, and then there's this whole thing and between them, and then someone films that encounter. I was expecting that incident to become a lot more in the book. Like, the book is kind of about that, but it's about a lot more. It's more about the main character Amira and like all the different relationships with the white people in her life. Not even like relationships, but like how the white people in her life that she encounters like treats her. So we have the mother of the girl that she babysits, Alex, and Alex is like constantly wanting to like prove herself to Amira. She's constantly like wondering what Amira thinks of her. It was interesting, but what I really liked about this was it was ridiculous. Like, there were times in this that I was laughing like just at how ridiculous the things that these characters were doing. There's this one scene where Alex and a few of her friends who, you know, they're all like 35 years old, are hiding in a closet at a party gossiping about something because Alex needs to tell something to all of them and like have a freak out moment. And I was just like reading this like, is that real? Like, is that really happening? So I wasn't expecting this book to have this like really light and like funny humorous tone, which is why I think I really enjoyed it as much as I did. It's very soap opera-y at times, but I think it had a really nice balance between being this kind of soap opera-y story while also having these social issues spread throughout the story. So we had obviously race, but there was also discussions on class, and it was just really interesting. I had a lot of fun with it. I will say I watched the live show that the Black Hotties did for this book. Something they discussed a lot was the main character Amira and how she wasn't the strongest protagonist, and often when something was done to her that was racist, or she would never stand up for herself or say anything, but then she wouldn't even think anything in her head. She would just kind of let it slide. And they discussed that and said how that they felt this book wasn't exactly written for black people, that it was written for more white people. I will link the live show where they discussed this book down below and up in the cards. I had a really fun time with this and I gave it 5 stars. Okay, let's talk about this beast that I completed. Look look how big this book is. It is over 1,000 pages and I finished it. The Way of Kings, it is the first book in the Stormlight Archive, which is going to be a 10-book series. This is book 1. There are 3 main perspectives that we follow in this story. One perspective we follow is this younger girl who has just ventured away from home. She is on a quest to do something in order to save and redeem her family. So her idea of helping her family is trying to become an apprentice to this like well-respected and well-educated lady, but her becoming an apprentice is a little bit of a hoax. It's actually all a disguise in order for her to steal this magical object that this lady has in her possession. Then we follow this other character, Kaladin, who is the main character in this book. We are first introduced to him and he is a soldier, and then immediately after that introduction chapter we see him as a slave. And a lot of this book is flashbacks of his past leading up to how he became a soldier, but also how he became enslaved. The way the slavery works in this, or well, the way Kaladin is a slave, is he's part of this bridge group. So he's like a bridge slave, I guess you could say. And what they do is they carry like bridges, so it's like a crew of them, carry them on their back so that the soldiers can like get over them, because in this world the setting is there's all these like chasms and it's really interesting like landscape, so they need help, or the armies need help to get across, get to places. And then there's another character called Delano. He's someone with a lot of political power, so through his chapters we are really seeing how the higher ups in the world work and run, and all the political turmoil that is happening up top. But I can't really say too much more about him because he isn't introduced into the story until a couple of 100 pages in. I overall really enjoyed this. It was definitely like work to get into, I guess. Like there's a lot of world building. I think I also like put too much pressure on myself to like annotate it thoroughly, which sometimes you just gotta be more chill when it comes to your annotating. In all honesty, it's sort of hard to critique this because my one critique would be that this book had too little plot. But the thing is, it makes a lot of sense why there wasn't a whole lot of plot in this book, because there needed to be a lot of setup since this is the first book in what will be a 10-book series. So I can't really give that critique because it doesn't really seem valid, and I don't have another way I would have preferred Brandon Sanderson to have written this book. There were definitely POVs that I preferred over others, so sometimes my interest would waver in and out. But other than that, I really enjoyed this and I gave it 4.5 stars. I started a new series this month on audio, and that series is called the Lockwood & Co series. I listened to the first 2 books in this series. This series is about ghost hunting. It's set in London, this alternate London where ghosts exist and they are always out to get people. What I really liked about this was there's different types of ghosts, like different levels, and there's people with different powers. The main character whose perspective we follow is Lucy, and she is a medium of sorts. She's quite a strong one because she can see all kinds of ghosts. Lockwood, who is the owner of their little like ghost hunting organization, he can see ghosts, but he doesn't have as strong a sense of them as Lucy does. And then their third member of their team is George, who has no abilities when it comes to ghosts, and all of them are teenagers. Now the reason why teenagers in this world work with ghost hunting is because those are the only ones that can see them. So what's really interesting is as Lucy gets older, she will eventually lose her abilities to see ghosts. In this world there's a lot of organizations, most of them are big organizations run by adults that hire kids and teenagers to do the ghost hunting work. But what's really interesting about Lucy's group is, which is called Lockwood & Co, that's their organization name, is they are independent and they work just with themselves. Basically the story is them getting ghost hunting jobs, going off doing the ghost hunting and then getting paid for it. It's a lot of fun, like it's what I wanted. I wanted a ghost hunting story. I've been listening to the audiobooks, and something I really wish was there was more like sound effects or like a different narrator that would really like create the atmosphere, because there were really spooky scenes, but the narrator doesn't change her voice from, you know, a normal conversation scene where they're just talking about civil matters to a scene that is really spooky. And I wish they would do that. If you've ever listened to the audiobooks for The Diviners, those are so fantastically produced, and I think the narrator also does such a fantastic job with all the voices of not only all the different characters but also the scenes, like from scene to scene. When it, you know, it changes from like a party scene to a really dark atmospheric scene, there's a real shift in tone. I really wish this narrator did that, because I could definitely just see it adding a lot more value to the story if that was the case. I will also say that my one main gripe with the series is there's quite a bit of fat phobia. George is fat and he's just like constantly made fun of for being fat. So in the second book, for example, they are leaving somewhere at midnight. They're at this like party and they have to leave, and one of, I don't know, a random character goes to them,
"Oh, why are you going now? Like, do you have to leave at midnight?" And
they made like some Cinderella comment about the pumpkin, and then one of the other characters goes like,
yeah, George is already on his way to becoming a pumpkin.
and it's just like, why? It's not necessary. Otherwise, I do really enjoy this story and I have a lot of fun reading them. I gave book 1 3.75 stars and I gave book 2 3.25 stars. And the way book 2 ended, I'm very, very excited to see where the story continues. And something else I really do enjoy about this series is I really love the relationship between the 3 main characters. They're a very close-knit and family type of group of people. The last book I want to talk about is another audiobook, and that is Navigating the Stars. This is a young adult novel that is a sci-fi. Now, it's set in the future where civilization has basically moved mostly to outer space, and we follow this young girl who has to move around a lot from planet to planet because of her parents' job. And I really liked how the concept of time was played with this. It talked about traveling from planet to planet and how that could take years. At the very beginning of this book, we're introduced to this main character who's about to leave the current planet that she's been living on, and she's saying goodbye to her friends, and she has to say goodbye to them for good because by the time she arrives on her new planet and new home, her friends would have lived 20 years of their life. And that was just a really interesting dynamic, and I really liked that. However, a lot of this book was about nothing, and I went into this thinking that there was going to be a lot of exploring and a lot of adventure, and that was not the case at all. There's a lot of like nothing that goes on, unfortunately, and it's very dull. We were introduced to quite a few characters and I thought we were going to have a really nice cast of characters, which is my preferred types of books. I really like books that do have a nice group of characters. However, this one, there was just like the main girl and her love interest, and they were both just like incredibly boring. They really didn't get up to much. A lot of this book, we're just kind of watching her doing hacking on the computer. This book got more disappointing as it went on because there were some really cool ideas. I also thought that the villain who was revealed at the end was quite comical. Like, I just didn't take him seriously. I've read a couple of Marie V. Snyder books and I really enjoy her fantasy books. I think she just does a lot more when she does her fantasy. Like, she tends to have plot, she tends to have side characters that I enjoy. But when she does her science fiction, I think this is my second science fiction book of hers I've read, it's just like so lackluster. Fortunately, I gave this book 2 stars on Goodreads, but it's more like a 1.75. So those are all the books I completed in August. Let me know how your reading went in August and if you've picked up any of these or if you plan to. Otherwise, I hope that you're enjoying whatever you are currently reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!